If it's Halloween today, happy Halloween, and if it's not, happy other day of the year. This video contains flashing lights and colors. When you think of the Magic Kingdom, what comes to mind? Princesses, delicious food, charming characters, bloodthirsty aliens who eat people alive? Yes, for a few years, an example of the latter could be found at that park. This ambitious attraction, named the ExtraTERRORestrial Alien Encounter, delighted and horrified guests from 1994 to 2003. It has since become infamous not only for its technical innovations for the time, but for being perhaps the most terrifying theme park attraction of all time. But how did such an attraction get built in the first place? How did it work? And why did it close? The answers may surprise you, as there's a lot of misinformation online. So today, let's take a deep dive into Disney's most horrifying attraction, right here on Theme Park Crazy. Before we get started, here's a big shout out to former Disney Imagineer Dan Molitor, who helped supervise the script for this video. Through emails, he was able to give me some crucial insight as to what's true and not true about this attraction. He also helped me write some of the passages for the script, so big thank you to Dan. Our story begins in 1984, when Michael Eisner became CEO of the Walt Disney Company. Right away, he sought to shake up Disney's theme park division and modernize the attractions. As the famous story goes, his teenage son Breck was unimpressed by Disneyland, kind of like how future audiences were unimpressed with the last Witch Hunter movie he directed starring Vin Diesel. If you remember the scene from a Goofy movie where Goofy takes Max to Lester's Possum Park, it was pretty much the same situation. Like Max, Breck reportedly thought the park was lame and appealed too much to little kids. Furthermore, amusement parks throughout the 80s were going through a thrill ride renaissance. Across the globe, parks were building massive roller coasters with plenty of loops and record-breaking height and speed stats. The Disney parks were always intended for general audiences of all ages, but Eisner knew that teens and young adults wanted more thrilling and modern attractions. The way he saw it, the well-themed but relatively tame and traditional rides at the Disney parks wouldn't cut it. He also sought to incorporate non-Disney intellectual properties to expand the park's audience. This effort started with Captain EO, a thrilling 4D short film starring Michael Jackson. The film featured 2 songs performed by Jackson, as well as in-theater effects like lasers and smoke synchronized to the film. In addition to being directed by The Godfather's Francis Ford Coppola, it was produced by Star Wars creator George Lucas. Speaking of Star Wars, the modernization soon continued with the addition of Disneyland Star Tours in 1987. This attraction was the thrilling motion simulator that took place in the Star Wars universe. Both Captain EO and Star Tours were massive hits, and between each ride's opening, a creative meeting with Disney Imagineers and George Lucas was held. This meeting was meant to discuss future park projects that could potentially follow both Star Tours and Captain EO. At one point, the idea of a show that utilized binaural audio was brought up. Now, in simple terms, binaural sound is pretty much 3D for your ears. Through a special recording process, binaural audio gives the illusion that a sound is moving in the same space as you when the source actually isn't in the room. To put it simply, 2 microphones are essentially built into a fake head being positioned where the ear canals are. This allows the system to record the same exact sound patterns as a human pair of ears, thereby making the audio much more immersive. It's not the same thing, but a similar example I can give is the Aerosmith song Lizard Love from the Rugrats Go Wild soundtrack. The intro has the sound of a housefly, and when you're wearing headphones, it actually sounds like a fly is buzzing around the back of your head. This is not the same as sound recorded via binaural audio, but the 3D sound effect is comparable. During the brainstorm session, when binaural technology was described to George Lucas, it triggered an idea for an experience in which a scary monster runs amok in a darkened theater. This would turn the theater into a sort of sci-fi haunted house. This would be a perfect use of binaural audio, as guests would feel like a monster was lurking around in the dark. Despite what you might see on the internet, that meeting marked the end of George Lucas's formal involvement with the project. Sure, Lucas's suggestion of a creature on the loose sparked the concept that would eventually become Alien Encounter, but aside from approving the final version of the script later on, he had no further involvement in the project besides that one meeting. That will come up again later. Around this time, Eisner's push for modernization continued, and he had the outdated Tomorrowland areas in his crosshairs. In particular, Disneyland's Tomorrowland still reflected a view of the future from the 50s and 60s. For Eisner, this was unacceptable, so under his direction, a new expansion plan for the area was created. This idea, named Tomorrowland 2055, would turn the increasingly retro area into a futuristic alien metropolis. This expansion was planned for the early 1990s. Unfortunately, there would soon be one major obstacle to it: money. Upon the opening of France's Euro Disney, now Disneyland Paris, in 1992, the park quickly became an infamous financial dumpster fire. Attendance was underwhelming, the costs of attractions spiraled out of control, and the whole thing lost Disney quite a bit of money. As a result, budgets for new attractions were slashed, and many ambitious projects, including Tomorrowland 2055, were cancelled or put on hold indefinitely. However, one proposed attraction that would survive was the binaural audio show that was proposed. After a few years of early-stage development, officials began making plans to finally bring this show into fruition. At first, the proposed show was intended to serve as a replacement for Disneyland's Mission to Mars attraction. This show, formerly known as Rocket to the Moon and Flight to the Moon, was a multimedia theater-in-the-round production. The circular theater consisted of stadium-style seating with a flat round screen embedded into the ceiling and floor. Both screens would show synchronized films of outer space, as if guests were looking out the windows of a spacecraft. Aside from just the film media, the seats would also vibrate to simulate the spaceship's movement. The original film from the 1950s simulated a mission to the moon, though the destination was later changed to Mars. This was after the 1969 Apollo 11 moon landing made the destination not seem as exciting or mysterious. Even with the show being rethemed to Mars though, the technology and show experience was still largely dated. It ran the same for almost 20 years at both Disneyland and a later installed version at Disney World. The show had become labeled by officials as non-preferred capacity. What this means is that after so many years of operation, the attraction wasn't generating enough throughput to justify its existence. The theater had 100 seats, but oftentimes it wouldn't seat even a fraction of that number. Essentially, Disney was asking themselves, why have this high-capacity theater taking up valuable space in our park if nobody is checking it out? Why bother spending boatloads of money on an attraction that people don't like? As part of the Tomorrowland 2055 project, Imagineers plan to go out with the old and in with the new and install a binaural sound show in the same theater. By the early 90s, a separate idea came up that would eventually shake up this concept. This suggestion involved an IP that was pretty much the exact opposite of what you think of when you hear the word Disney. That IP was Ridley Scott's 1979 sci-fi masterpiece, Alien. This film was centered on a bloodthirsty alien monster named a xenomorph that hunts the crew of a commercial starship. This film was notable for its shocking moments of gore, genuine terror, and haunting visual designs by the legendary H.R. Giger. The film became such an iconic hit that Disney acquired a license from Fox to use the IP in their parks. Eventually, the Alien IP was included as one of the set pieces in the now-defunct Great Movie Ride at Disney's MGM Studios. About halfway through the ride, guests came across a recreation of the scene from the movie where Sigourney Weaver's character Ripley is stalked by the xenomorph. The xenomorph shows up twice, once coming out of the wall and again lunging from the ceiling. Though it was certainly terrifying, it became one of the most popular moments of the ride. Interestingly enough though, even before the Great Movie Ride opened, former Disney Chief Operating Officer Frank Wells made the suggestion to build an entire attraction themed to the Alien movie. His thought process was that if Disney was paying for the theme park rights of the Alien franchise, why not use them for more than one attraction? One of the first ideas pitched for this attraction was a shooting dark ride called Nostromo, named after the spaceship in Alien. This would have been similar to what Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger spin would become. The idea was that you'd be shooting the xenomorphs and scoring points along the way. Of course, there would be more than one xenomorph, so it would have been more like the 1986 sequel named Aliens. However, this concept never made it beyond the initial pitch, and it was not developed further. Somewhere along the line, the development of the aforementioned binaural audio show was expanded to include a version based on the Alien IP. It is worth noting that the original version never went away and was still considered alongside the Alien version. Now here's where the story gets a bit fogged up by misconceptions. Much like people thought a vomitorium was literally a room where ancient ruminants threw up to eat more, much of Alien Encounter's history has been misconstrued over the years. As I stated in the beginning, I was able to get in contact with Dan Molitor, a former Imagineer and lead writer on the original Alien Encounter project. Through email, he was able to give some crucial insight into this attraction's history and the common myths surrounding it. The involvement of the Alien IP brings us to a common misconception. Many historians have stated that a group of older, more traditional Imagineers greatly opposed the idea of an R-rated movie like Alien being represented in a family theme park. According to rumors, Imagineers sought help from George Lucas to serve as a mediator between them and Eisner. Some say he ended up convincing Eisner that an alien-themed attraction was completely inappropriate for the Magic Kingdom. It's a juicy story, the only problem is, it's not true. According to Molitor, George Lucas only attended the one meeting mentioned earlier. For contractual reasons, since Lucas attended the meeting, he had the right to approve or disapprove the script discussed. Lucas did approve the final version of the script for the proposed Disneyland version, but other than this, he had zero involvement in the project. Granted, Molitor did add that while it is possible Lucas might have spoken with Eisner privately about the matter, no record of that has ever come to light, and it was never mentioned within Imagineering. The only other way Lucas was involved was indirectly. To help develop the binaural effects, Imagineers contacted Randy Tom from Lucas's company Skywalker Sound. That said, nothing came of that, and the Disneyland version of the attraction ended up being cancelled with the rest of Tomorrowland 2055. Now you might be asking, wait a minute, if George Lucas didn't convince Michael Eisner to drop the Alien IP, what did? The real answer is just business. During development, the Alien franchise's owner 20th Century Fox, a non-Disney affiliated studio at the time, had decided to stop licensing its properties to outside companies. According to Molitor, Fox realized they could make even more money by keeping their rights for their own theme parks in the future. Such parks never came to fruition. They almost opened a park in Malaysia, but some of the IPs were removed before opening after Disney acquired the studio. But that park, now named Genting Skyworlds, is a story for another day. Anyway, once again, the show was originally intended for Disneyland, with Imagineers hoping to eventually clone it at Walt Disney World in Florida. But after the cancellation of Tomorrowland 2055, development of the show was halted for a year before eventually being restarted as a Magic Kingdom attraction. Molitor mentioned that it was also pitched for the Tokyo Disneyland Resort, but officials at the Oriental Land Company, who own and operate the park, were skeptical. At the Magic Kingdom, it was once again decided to repurpose the old Mission to Mars theater. The venue at Disneyland, meanwhile, eventually became Red Rocket's Pizza Port, now Alien Pizza Planet, a restaurant that allegedly serves some truly terrible pizza. But to me, even the worst pizza is better than the best pickled herring. Apologies to any pickled herring fans in the comments. According to Disney Imagineers who worked on the attraction, the show's production ended up being pretty hectic. Although the Imagineers wanted the attraction to be geared towards teenagers like Eisner's son, there were clashing opinions on how to go about it. The term creative differences certainly applies here. In terms of the story, Imagineers kept the idea of an alien monster escaping into the audience using binaural sound to give the illusion that it was actually inside the theater. Above all else, the audio was the star of the show, but Imagineers came up with several ways to crank up the fear factor through innovative engineering. The seats in the existing Mission to Mars theater were greatly modified. In addition to a new, sleek sci-fi appearance, they featured a unique binaural audio playing device that came in the form of what resembled a roller coaster restraint. For this visual, I'll be using a public domain image of an old man sitting. Crude, yes, but it's still better than AI. Here's how the restraints worked. As guests took their seats, the restraints were lifted high into the air to allow people to sit. Then, as the show began, a pneumatic air pressurized system lowered the restraints onto guests' shoulders. This was provided that each guest was at least 44 inches tall. Any attempt to mess with the restraint system or move while the restraints were trying to lower would cause the lowering to deactivate and require a cast member to manually lower them. The restraints then moved up and down to calibrate the movements for later in the show. Attached to each restraint and behind each guest's head was a set of speakers that played the binaural audio. They would play the sounds necessary for the show, which we will get into later. This horse collar restraint system had multiple purposes. Of course, one reason was common sense safety. Obviously, you didn't want people panicking and leaving their seats in the middle of the show. If someone attempted this, they could easily hurt themselves running around a dark theater. However, this wasn't the main purpose of the restraints. They actually served two crucial functions for the show. First, the horse collars positioned the speakers correctly for the binaural sound to work as intended. This is also why guests under 44 inches could not watch the show. Their heads would not be able to reach the speakers and the illusion would be ineffective. Originally, it was considered to include headphones with each seat, but from an operations standpoint, it would have been a real pain to have to clean the headphones after every show. And besides, from a common sense standpoint, someone could easily just take off their headphones and escape the scares. In addition, the restraints played an important physical role, as during the show, the alien was supposed to land on guests' shoulders. When this moment occurred, the restraints would press down, giving the illusion that a monster was standing on top of you. Aside from the restraints, the seats contained transducers as well. These converted electric signals into mechanical vibration to simulate the alien's footsteps. This particular illusion was aided by 1800 watt per channel subwoofers repurposed for Mission to Mars. But wait, there's more. The back of each seat had two surprises as well. At certain points of the show, the harnesses would pump out moist air to simulate the alien breathing down guests' necks. And as if that weren't terrifying enough, another effect involved air being blown into a soft tube to touch the back of guests' heads. This was meant to simulate the alien's tongue, and it was said to be like one of those party favors you see on New Year's Eve. Finally, air blasters in the front of each row and water sprinklers on the ceiling would further play a role in the show's story. But before we get to the experience, there's one more important thing to discuss, and that's the famous animatronic of the alien creature itself. This right here is the final design Imagineers landed on. Now you may be wondering, like I was for a long time, how they came up with such a surreal design with so many different parts. What animal or mythical creature inspired it? Well, the answer is surprisingly complex, yet simple. According to Molitor, the main goal with the star creature was to design it based on how scary it would sound. Molitor said, quote, "Binaural sound effects work best with high-frequency noises. So the creature was designed with lots of chitinous armor plates, gnashing teeth, skittery claws, etc. Basically, all of the insect-like features gave it a creepy, crawly sound, kind of like reverse ASMR or regular ASMR depending on what you prefer. Though some Imagineers wanted to go all out in making the monster scary, there was another faction who wanted a different approach. They wanted the monster to be more Disney scary, and thus took a more elegant fantasy-based approach. They focused on the monster's visuals and making it an interesting creature to look at. Because of this camp, Molitor said that the monster ended up with glowing eyes, horns, and bat-like wings resembling Maleficent in her dragon form. Yes, Maleficent's dragon form, not her forgettable sidekick like in the Angelina Jolie movie hardly anyone remembers, but that's beside the point. Furthermore, some Imagineers wanted to obscure the animatronic as much as possible. Instead of focusing too much on how the monster looked, they wanted viewers to get brief glimpses of it through fog and strobe lights. The idea was that the effects would obscure the view and make it so guests would use their imagination to create the scariest possible monster in their heads. On the flip side, other Imagineers wanted the creature to be more visible. They argued that if they were going to spend a lot of money developing a large, advanced animatronic, their work deserved to be seen by the audience. In the final show, the fog and teleportation tube opaqueness were lessened, allowing guests to get a better look. However, it was still fairly obscured by fog, flashing lights, and colors, hence the lack of clear views from passenger videos. As Molitor put it, the design of the alien creature is an excellent example of what went wrong with the whole process of developing that show. He added that management didn't want to take sides, and that the final design ended up being a disjointed compromise that didn't really please anyone. But I don't know, the monster's kind of adorable. On the contrary, Imagineers knew that the show would be anything but cute. They wanted it to be scary, sure, but it seemed like nobody agreed on how scary it should be or what kind of scary they should aim for. Some wanted the show to be more silly like the Haunted Mansion, while others wanted a full-on horror show. This talk of audience fear soon led to more technical discussions. As Molitor confirmed, there were in fact discussions about imposing an age restriction on the show with an enforced PG-13 rating. Some Imagineers were totally in favor of the rating, as they felt the show was inappropriate for small children. Others, though, felt that setting an age requirement would set a dangerous precedent for future attractions. Give an age restriction to one show, and it could create a domino effect of excluding guests from multiple attractions. Ultimately, Molitor said that the strongest arguments came from the operations side. It simply would have been impractical to tell parents they couldn't take their kids on an attraction. This would have led to plenty of angry visits to guest service. And besides, it's not like you can ask every 13-year-old to show their IDs. All of these behind-the-scenes conflicts led Dan Molitor to say the following about the attraction's development. The original version of the show, which is the one I worked on off and on for 5 years, was a disaster. Essentially, there wasn't a single creative vision guiding the project, just a bunch of different teams, executives, and designers all pulling in different directions. Molitor described it as a too many cooks in the kitchen situation, and it really showed. The show was developed like a basic audio attraction, and there wasn't enough time or money for proper playtesting of the visuals and physical effects added to it. Everything had to be installed and programmed right there in the field, leaving no room for tweaks or adjustments once problems popped up. This meant that when the soft opening came around, some Imagineers were bracing themselves for the worst. On one fateful day, Michael Eisner himself attended the attraction's first public show, and what he saw, well, let's get into it. Like many Disney attractions, the ExtraTERRORestrial Alien Encounter started off with a pre-show. The videos on the attraction's pre-show, as well as the videos in the main show, were directed by Jerry Reese, who directed the also terrifying Brave Little Toaster. The first part of this pre-show took guests into the fictional Interplanetary Convention Center. Here, alien company XS is presenting its newest teleportation technology. A video presentation, hosted by an unnamed alien played by supermodel Tyra Banks, introduced the audience to the sinister company's mission of seizing the future. Guests also met the company's chairman, L.C. Clench, played by actor Jeffrey Jones. Clench boasted about XS Tech's supposed commitment to helping less fortunate planets. But in reality, it's clear he's more interested in expanding his market reach than actually helping anyone. The pre-show sets the tone perfectly. It's the kind of cold corporate video that really gives you a bad feeling about XS Tech. It's obvious that XS Tech isn't exactly a company you'd want involved with your business, let alone your teleportation systems. After this video, guests were led into the second pre-show room for a live demonstration of the teleportation technology. This segment was hosted by a wisecracking, bumbling robot named TOM-2000, which stood for Technobotic Oratorical Mechanism Series 2000. This character was voiced by the late great Phil Hartman, famous for his run on Saturday Night Live, and of course, you can't forget his all-time classic role as Troy McClure on The Simpsons. TOM, or Tom, proudly introduces the audience to the future of transportation. He goes on to prepare a demonstration of the teleportation device built by XS. To prove the system's safety, he teleports a cute little alien named Skippy from one tube to another. Unfortunately, things don't go as planned. The teleportation fries Skippy to a crisp, leaving him smoldering and disoriented.
As you can see, our happy traveler has been safely reintegrated. Now, wouldn't you agree? Excess teleportation is the only way to... What have I done? Not that it's anything serious.
Tom remarks on how he should have taken a refresher course and instructs guests to move on to the main attraction. This sequence was another hint that maybe XS Tech wasn't as competent or as ethical as their promotional video tried to suggest. Still, it was relatively lighthearted and humorous, and for some, it would be a detriment to the show's initial reception. Speaking of which, Michael Eisner was said to be frustrated immediately after viewing the pre-show. Molitor said he overheard Eisner say to the Imagineers, "I can't believe you did that." Now, although Michael Eisner had approved the script in advance, Molitor noted that the decision to cast Phil Hartman was possibly a factor in Eisner's reaction. After the financial disappointment of Euro Disneyland, Eisner was the subject of joke and ridicule across the board. On Saturday Night Live, Phil Hartman actually portrayed Eisner in several sketches in a pretty unflattering way. Apparently, several Imagineers suggested that Eisner was not happy with these sketches whatsoever. As a result, he reportedly held a grudge against Hartman, which might have led to his reaction to the pre-show. Sketch comedy anecdotes aside, let's move on to the main attraction. After guests entered the theater and took their seats, monitors would play the main show movie. This film was yet another example of the too many cooks in the kitchen dilemma. As Molitor put it, because of the way Imagineering was structured at the time, the video pre-production and production was out of the hands of the original concept team and turned over to WDI's Media Production Division, which had been set up as a separate unit during the development of the Disney MGM studios. Because of this separation and the poor communication between the two groups, the media used in attractions didn't always fit with the physical shows it was supposed to support. This certainly is the case with Alien Encounter. One of the more astute criticisms of the show notes that the tone and style of the video does not match the very serious and creepy sci-fi atmosphere of the theater and the experience you have within it. This is yet another example of how not having one vision guiding an attraction's development can lead to disappointing results. To emphasize, this is not about one group or another having more or less talent, or one direction being better than another, but rather the inevitable problems you get when there is no one vision guiding everyone. The film starts off with two alien excess workers instructing guests to take their seats. These workers are Excess Management Supervisor Spinlock, played by actor Kevin Pollak of A Few Good Men and The Usual Suspects, and Dr. Themis, played by actress Kathy Najimy. Najimy is perhaps best well known for her role of Mary Sanderson in Disney's Hocus Pocus, and as the voice of Peggy Hill on King of the Hill. Spinlock and Themis are working on the teleportation technology and plan to use it to bring a member of the audience to their planet to meet Chairman Clench. Right off the bat, it's clear that the technology is flawed and Clench is rushing its development to put profit over safety. Despite this, Clench's hubris gives him an idea. Instead of teleporting a member of the audience, he will teleport himself to the theater so he can meet everyone. This change in plans forces Themis to completely recalibrate the teleportation device in mere seconds, as Clench enters the tube and demands them to send him to Earth. Before Themis can lock in the trajectory, Spinlock activates the machine, accidentally sending Clench's signal to another planet. In a panic, they try to recover the transmission, but instead of bringing back their boss, they lock onto something else, the Star Alien. The monster is then beamed into the glass tube inside the theater, and here's where more of the magic happens. The alien actually ascends from underneath the tube. The animatronic was situated on a turntable to allow for more movement inside the confined space. Themis and Spinlock quickly realize the audience is in danger and frantically try to send the alien back. However, the alien manages to break out of the tube, and when Themis tries to activate the teleporter, the power goes out. The glass-breaking effect is another interesting trick. Here, you can see the regular glass tube is actually attached to the broken one, so when the tube is raised, one half is switched out for the other. When the alien escapes the tube later on, the animatronic simply sinks into the floor while it's dark. The power outage part of the attraction is also where the binaural audio really kicked in. Here, guests heard the sounds of the alien roaming around the theater looking for a meal. Because let's be honest, if you were suddenly teleported to a K-pop restaurant, you might as well stick around and enjoy the tom yum soup. As discussed before, various effects activated via the seats. Hot breath on guests' necks, tubes to simulate a tongue, vibrations for the alien's footsteps, and the horse collars pressing down to represent the alien landing on your shoulders. At one point, a maintenance worker is sent to reactivate the generator, but is eaten by the alien in the process. You heard his screams as he was eaten alive, and water would fall from the ceiling to represent his blood. Now, contrary to popular belief, there were no special chemicals added to this water to make it sticky, nor was it warmed by anything. It was just regular, potable water that was safe to drink. That said, Molitor said of these claims, "Many of these sorts of rumors just prove the viability of our original idea, which was that the guests' own imaginations would be a crucial part of the show. That's why some of us didn't really want to show much of the creature. Your own fears would be scarier than anything we could build." Soon enough, the power is turned back on, and the alien is back inside the tube. In an effort to send the creature back, Spinlock and Themis end up blowing the alien up. Here, the water sprinklers are activated again, along with the air blasters going off to represent the creature's inside splattering onto guests. Spinlock apologizes for any inconvenience, reaffirming Excess's phrase of seizing the future. This would be like if you found a dead mouse in your Whopper and the Burger King manager simply said, "Have it your way." Meanwhile, in the original version, Chairman Clench is teleported to Earth as intended, but the tube's protective shield is lowered down. In this case, guests can hear him pounding on the metal tube when they exit. The fact that XS is so willing to write off this traumatic experience as a little glitch instead of immediately offering intergalactic therapy really gets the message across about how awful the company is. In this regard, the story was extremely intelligent. Unfortunately, there was a pretty big problem with how it was told. Since most of the attraction took place in the dark, the audio was the only way to know what was going on. However, Imagineers didn't take into account that the screams of guests would keep them from hearing crucial plot points. Now, it was true that Michael Eisner wanted the experience to be more intense, but for the most part, he was upset that people screaming made it hard to tell what was going on. Because the attraction was developed as an audio show, it was planned to focus mainly on sound rather than visuals. So all of this led to a pretty disastrous soft opening. Once again, Molitor emphasized that the team producing the media like videos and audio, and the team working on the physical show in the theater, were separate divisions that lacked communication. He said that this disconnect resulted in the timing of the video and audio not matching what was going on physically in the theater. Essentially, many felt that the end result was just a disjointed mess of people screaming and not really getting anything out of it besides that. And speaking of screams, here's an interesting anecdote from Dan Molitor. During that initial screening, there was a 5-year-old boy in the audience who was said to be so scared that he started screaming, "Get me out of here," the moment the restraints came down. Plus, former Imagineer Mike West said his 13-year-old daughter was hysterically bawling by the end of that same show. And the next day, he said that Imagineers got a call that Michael said it was too scary. Following this infamous screening, Imagineering's creative leadership went into damage control mode, and that's where things really fell apart. Molitor said that him and the original creative team were cut off from the redesign process, while a new group, led by Mike West, was brought in under conflicting instructions. The two groups weren't even allowed to communicate with each other. West didn't even know that Molitor was cut off. Yet another example of too many cooks. Now, in regards to Michael Eisner reportedly wanting the experience to be more intense, it depends on who you ask. Although Mike West suggested Eisner thought it was too scary, director Jerry Reese, who worked on the pre-produced videos, corroborated that Eisner wanted the experience to be more intense. So he thought it was too scary, but he also wanted it to be more intense. Talk about chaotic. Or maybe he wanted the experience to be as intense as possible for teens and adults, but for the pre-show to at least give people a heads up in advance. At least that's the impression I'm getting. But either way, adjustments were in order. First off, there was the pre-show. Phil Hartman's lighthearted, silly character Tom 2000 was replaced with the sinister SIR, or SIR. This stood for Simulated Intelligence Robotics. This new character was played by the incredible Tim Curry, famous for his countless roles like Dr. Frankenfurter, Pennywise, Nigel Thornberry, Professor Calamitous, and countless others. To put it bluntly, Sir was much more malicious than his predecessor. Curry played this cold and menacing role to perfection, almost too well.
Welcome, weary travelers, to the great big universe of XS. You may call me Sir. That is SIR, which stands for Simulated Intelligence Robotics. What do you want, Skippy? No, you may not get out. You're a lucky volunteer.
As he introduced the same teleportation demonstration as before. Again, the small alien Skippy was the test subject. Once again, the teleportation device scorches Skippy, but Sir just brushes this off, saying,
"Oh, shut up, Scruffy. You're not burned. You just got a healthy glow."
He then says he can reverse this process, but instead, he decides to suspend the teleportation indefinitely, casually leaving Skippy's molecules trapped in a disintegrated state. This moment drove home just how reckless and sadistic XS tech really is. For some, it was the perfect setup for what was to come, a darkly unsettling and disturbing glimpse into the company's disregard for life and safety. Without a doubt, the new pre-show set a much more ominous tone that better prepared guests for the terrifying encounter that followed. However, for others, including Molitor himself, it was a step down from the original pre-show. He said of the original, others liked it and thought it was a nice twist on the old Disney trope of hint at scariness then lighten it with laughs, which is the basic model of the Haunted Mansion. I still think it worked better than the revised version, which in my mind was blatantly sadistic and not at all appropriate. He went on to say that many guests simply found this new pre-show unpleasant and upsetting, and he wondered whether or not it went too far for what was supposed to be a Disney attraction. In fact, Molitor told me his heart sank when he first viewed the new pre-show, and he didn't understand how killing off Skippy made the show any less scary. The way I see it though, if you close your eyes and imagine Sir as Nigel Thornberry's evil twin brother, you may get a good laugh out of it. After the pre-show, guests entered the theater and experienced largely the same video as before. However, more audio and dialogue were added to give guests a better idea of the story. In the original, Themis simply says,
"That's not the chairman, he's on the other planet. We've picked up an alien,"
without elaborating on any of the creature's details. In this new version, though, she scans the creature and identifies it as Ornithius carnivorus. Ornithology is the study of birds, and carnivorous, of course, means the creature eats meat. Then, when the alien is beamed in, the first thing Themis says is,
Spinlock, since when does Clench have wings?
This let audiences know that the alien could fly, in case nobody knew what Ornithius meant. Knowing the creature could fly made its movements more unpredictable and explained how it was able to land on guests' shoulders. Another addition to the show was the use of a live actor. During the scene where the power goes out, a cast member was placed on the rafters above the theater and shown a flashlight attached to a cable down towards the audience. The addition of a real person added a new sense of realism and intensity to the attraction. For guests, it really seemed like a presentation that had gone wrong. The monitors also showed a new POV clip of the worker attempting to restore the power, once again directed by Jerry Reese. However, the alien finds him and chomps into him like he was a bell pepper in the Iron Chef opening, complete with a juicy crunching sound. And here's the fast fact. According to an interview with WDW News Today, those bone-breaking sounds were actually made by breaking VHS cassette tapes. No kidding. And in case you haven't seen it, WDW News Today actually had an event where they interviewed a few Imagineers and discussed the Alien Encounter attraction. If you haven't checked it out yet, I'll link it in the description. Furthermore, audiences were given a better idea on when they should scream and when they should pay attention to the story. After the maintenance worker is eaten, Spinlock says,
"People of Earth, quiet! Listen to me, please! Don't scream! If you remain perfectly quiet, it probably won't eat you."
This pretty much gave the cue that you may scream now. Towards the end of the show, Themis realizes the alien is attracted to screaming, and after activating the tube's speakers, she screams into the microphone to lure the alien inside of it. The show then ends the same way as the original, with the alien exploding, although Chairman Clench is sent back to XS Tech instead of to Earth. Reception to this new show was much more positive. Sure, children were terrified, and some even traumatized, but older guests and teenagers undoubtedly had a blast. Even amongst the screams and videos of it, you can hear people laughing too. You can really tell that guests had a lot of fun with the attraction, and you really have to give credit to the Imagineers for persevering through such a messy production. And here's something interesting they did to promote the attraction. In this promotional video, you'll notice that the silhouette of the alien is vastly different from the one on the actual attraction. This was due to Disney World's marketing department deliberately ignoring suggestions from the Imagineers and going their own way. Yet another cook in the kitchen. But if it was praised, why did it only last less than a decade? Well, once again, this is a common misconception. For decades, many have assumed that excessive complaints from parents and the show's scare factor led to its closure. Many have thought that the attraction was simply too intense for the Magic Kingdom and that it was closed for simply being too scary. But this is also baloney. Now, it is true that towards the end of its run at the park, the attraction did see a decrease in popularity. Some have speculated that the Magic Kingdom's audience was predominantly young children and families, and that there weren't enough thrill-seeking teenagers visiting to justify the attraction's existence. It definitely had its fans, but it was seen as more of a niche attraction than one of the more popular ones at the park. Some Imagineers believe that it was simply built at the wrong park. Dan Molitor even bluntly told me, "The truth of the matter is, Alien Encounter should have been done at Universal." There's also another theory that Jeffrey Jones, who played Chairman Clench, caused the attraction's closure. A year before the attraction closed, Jones was arrested for possession of illicit materials involving minors. Many believe that Disney used this as an easy out to justify closing the increasingly unpopular show, but according to Molitor, it was just a bad coincidence. And the attraction's closure was likely set in stone before Jones's arrest. Good, because the less I have to talk about Jeffrey Jones, the better. No, the real reason the show closed was simple: money. This attraction, with its complex effects, advanced audio systems, and its use of live actors, was a complete money pit. Molitor stated that its heavy use of liquid nitrogen for fog effects was especially pricey. The theater could sit 162 people, but not nearly enough people experienced it to justify the high price of operation. And even if every show was fully seated, its capacity was paltry in comparison to something like Pirates of the Caribbean. The high-cost, low-throughput attraction just didn't look good on Disney's spreadsheet, and the decision to close the attraction wasn't very difficult. Fortunately for Disney, a possible replacement was soon made available in the form of the 2002 film Lilo and Stitch. The film was a great success, and the character of Stitch became an instant icon. Disney undoubtedly wanted to incorporate its newest IP into their theme parks, and it was the perfect replacement for Alien Encounter. Think about it, Stitch is chaotic, he makes noise, and he causes trouble. At one point in the movie, he's even inside of a glass tube. Really, he was the perfect fit. But the attraction Disney ended up installing was anything but perfect. The original Alien Encounter closed on October 12, 2003, with development soon underway for the new Stitch attraction. This new show, named Stitch's Great Escape, would have its grand opening over a year later on November 16, 2004. Opening day was actually pretty memorable, as Disney officials decided to throw toilet paper all over Cinderella Castle and write graffiti from Stitch on it. They also had a group of Elvis impersonators greeting guests at the entrance, truly one of the most notable grand openings in Disney history. As for the attraction, it was far different from its predecessor. The show started off in the Galactic Federation Prisoner Teleport Center. The Grand Councilwoman from the movie tells guests that they will serve as prison guards and will be taught the basics of how the job is done. After this, guests enter the old room that had Sir in it. But while the animatronic skeleton was kept the same, the appearance was altered. Sir's character was changed to Sergeant C4703BK2704-90210, or Sergeant 90210 for short. He was decked out in a purple potbelly and a new voice via Bing Bong himself, Richard Kind. The sergeant used 2 teleportation tubes to show off the different kinds of prisoners to guests. The prisoner levels range from the lowest threat level of 1 to the highest threat level of 3. Surprisingly, the Skippy animatronic remained on the attraction and was still named Skippy. Apparently, he was a level 1 prisoner who was there for jaywalking between the moons of Jupiter. Guests were also introduced to Skippy's incinerated form from the original, now a separate character known as the Donut Guy, adding long-haired to his singed appearance. The demonstration is interrupted by the film's villain, Gantu, not Jumba, who informs the sergeant that a high threat level prisoner is being beamed to the center. This caused the sergeant to faint, and guests entered the teleportation chamber. Inside the chamber, guests took their seats and the shoulder restraints, now rebranded as DNA scanners, lowered into place. These were supposedly meant to ensure the tracking cannons wouldn't confuse the prisoner's DNA with the guests. 2 new characters named First Officer Ombit and Ensign Get-Go appeared on the overhead screens to monitor the teleportation experiment. Soon enough, Stitch was beamed into the prison. This new animatronic took the place of the original alien, entering the same way through the bottom of the tube. Interestingly enough, he refers to himself as Stitch, even though this is supposed to take place before he even meets Lilo. Much more of a plot hole than any in the original. From there, the show is pretty much just Stitch doing gross and chaotic things with the aid of the former attraction's effects. The water sprinklers were used when he spit water across the chamber. Meanwhile, the binaural sound was reused so guests could hear him skittering across the room and sniffing in their ears. Plus, Stitch would jump on the shoulder restraints like the original alien stood on them. The most infamous repurposed effect was the one used for the alien breath. In this new show, Stitch stole a guest's chili dog and burped afterwards. The alien breath emitter now came with a gross chili dog smell effect to emulate that, and it was said to leave many guests nauseated. This was the moment many fans pointed to as the attraction's low point, where the horror and tension of Alien Encounter were replaced with gross-out gags and cartoon humor. But at least he didn't fart like he did in the anime, or the less-than-stellar live-action film. Seriously, Jumba the villain? Come on, man. Eventually, the whole thing ends with a video of Stitch running around Walt Disney World and licking the camera. As impressive as the animatronics were, and as much as audiences still loved Stitch, this attraction left a bad taste in people's mouths. What once aimed to be Disney's scariest attraction ever had been transformed into a slapstick comedy. Imagineers did their best to fit the Lilo and Stitch brand into this theater, but it ultimately left many guests who were fans of the original wishing the defunct show had stayed put. Surprisingly though, this version of the attraction actually lasted a few years longer than the original. Why was this? Well, once again, money. Although this attraction wasn't popular to any extent, it was still cheaper to run than its predecessor. Plus, Stitch was still a popular character, so the attraction at least had that going for it. Still, Dan Molitor described the makeover as a band-aid, and it too would end daily operations in 2016. It would operate seasonally to help with high crowd levels before eventually closing for good in 2018. As of right now, the theater is said to be an employee break area, with the seats and tubes still in place. And the Stitch animatronic doesn't look so good. It's unknown where the original Alien animatronic ended up, and no, it wasn't installed on Tokyo Disney Sea's Journey to the Center of the Earth. This is a common theory due to its somewhat similar appearance, but it is completely false. Aside from the scale of the animatronic being off, this ride opened before Alien Encounter even closed, so it doesn't add up. To sum it all up, Alien Encounter was Disney at its boldest and messiest, a cutting-edge horror show built on sound, suggestion, and restraints that made you swear a monster was right there in the room with you. Its development was a creative tug-of-war that no doubt caused enormous migraines for Imagineers, but the end result was one of the most memorable and talked about attractions in theme park history. To this day, the show's legacy endures, and it's considered to be a cult classic among Disney park fans. At one point, there was even an entire stage play put on in Los Angeles based on it. Alien Encounter was proof that engineering can truly bring fantasy to life, and its story was a reminder that even the most well-remembered attractions can have complex stories behind them. The headaches and struggles that Imagineers went through to put this attraction together are truly appreciated, and we owe them a lot of gratitude. Once again, huge thanks to Dan Molitor for the insight, and if you have any memories with this attraction, feel free to comment down below. Now it's time for the comment shoutout program. This is where I take 5 random comments from my previous video and read them out. These comments come from my video on the duality of the dive coaster. LMEYYYYY says, I love She-Ra. Angelica Jacobs 584 says, I loved Yukon Striker at Canada's Wonderland, first time on a drop coaster. Coastin' with Cool says, I was born the day Oblivion opened, March 14th, 1998. That Greens 550 says, She-Ra mentioned, absolutely love this coaster, definitely one of my favorites. And that's from a guess and Ride-Op POV. I'm a Busch Gardens Ride-Op. And Dustbot says, I read Flying Apsaras as Flying Asparagus. If you want to see your words in my next video, leave a comment down below and it may be selected. Please note though that inflammatory or spam comments will not be read. Thank you all so much, and if you want to support me on Patreon, you can do so once again at the link in the description. Thanks for watching, everyone. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. You can follow me on social media on Instagram and Facebook, or you can check out my website at themeparkcrazy.com. And I'm on TikTok. This is Theme Park Crazy, and I'll see you all next time.